Hello everyone, I welcome you all to the session on input and output functions in Python. So let us look at what are the input and output functions that are used to submit input to the program, and also the function used to deliver the output of the program to the user. So let us look at the functions used for input and output in Python. So to take the input from the user, Python uses the input function. So the input function is used to take the input data, but the scanned data that is entered by the user will be taken as a string. Will be taken as a string. So when you really want to scan a string from the keyboard, the input function will help the user to scan the string from the keyboard. But sometimes user want to read input values in the form of integers or in the form of real values, then the input function that scans the data as a string to be converted into an integer or as a real value. You can see it will prompt the user to enter the data, but it will scan the data as a string. So we'll look at the syntax of the input function in the next slide. And to deliver the output to the user, the Python program uses the predefined function called print function, which will display the output to the standard output device by default. So let us see the different ways of using input to scan the required data as an input for the given program. You can see on screen, if you really want to read a name from the user or from the keyboard, then you can use input function, which will be really scanning input data from the keyboard. So user can submit the input data from the keyboard. So it will establish a input stream. You can call it as an input stream. So when user is actually entering the data is scanned and it will be assigned. The scanned data will be assigned to a variable called a string object. It is name. So this way, the input function will scan the string data from the keyboard. But if you really want to scan integer values or real values, the scanned data has to be converted into an input type of data. So I can say this concept we call it as a typecasting. The concept of converting this integer data, string data into an integer, we call it as typecasting. If you want the real values to be scanned, you have to convert that into a float. So int and float are predefined classes which will convert the data that is entered in the form of a string into either an integer or a real value. For example, if you enter, by scanning, see value like 234, if you enter, the input will be scanning this as a string. But if you want to convert that into an integer, apply this int to typecast that, then the 234 becomes an integer. So that way you can scan integers or real values. So if you want to really scan multiple values at a time using the input function, you can see there is a function in Python, predefined function called as map. So you can read multiple values using input function. As we know, input is scanning. For example, I want to read say 1, 2, 3, 4 as an integer. So when you scan this as an input using input function, this will be scanned as a string. Now I am using a split is predefined function used to split the string into different values. So when it is splitting the data, by default it will use the space as the split constraint. Then one will be separated as a string. In fact, two will be separated as a string, 3 will be separated as a string, 4 will be separated as a string. However, these set of values again we are converting into an integer. So then 1 becomes integer, 2 becomes an integer, 3 becomes an integer, 4 becomes an integer. But as we are scanning 3 variables here, you are expected to give 3 values. So don't submit 4 values. Then the values are mapped to variables a comma b comma c by the map function. Map function will be working as an iterator. You can see the syntax how map function is really works. So it will be mapping the corresponding variables to the given list. So this is other way of scanning the multiple values. If you really want to scan the data in the form of list or set or tuple, so how do you scan this? You can see that we can create an empty list initially. Then the list size can be scanned. So once you can, once if you scan the list size, you want to scan the list elements, multiple items. So you can write a for loop over there. You can see for I in range 0 to n is the list size. You go on adding. Initially list is empty. You can use append function to add the elements. Say 1, 2, 3, 4. If n size is 4, you will be scanning 4 elements. That way you can scan the list. So other way of scanning the list is you can you can create an empty list consisting of see n number of zeros if n size is equal to 5. So initially you want to create see, all the elements as zeros, and later on you can update the values also. That way also you can create. See, I'm using for loop to scan the values. So just I am updating every time I'm scanning the value from the keyboard, and every index is getting updated. If we want to scan values like 10, 10 will be overwritten. So 0 will be overwritten by 10. If I want to really insert all 10s in the given. So this is another way of scanning the input. And if you want to use the map function also, you can use the map function. So map, as we have seen, map function is used to map the set of elements to the corresponding list of variables. So you can see you can take the data using input function from the keyboard. So later on it will be splitting the data, the 1, comma 2, comma 3, comma 4. If you submit, then the whole string, in fact, if you submit the string as like this will be split into individual tokens, and later on these tokens are converted into an integers because map is an iterator. So it will apply the function conversion function for each splitted value, and then it will be generating a memory object that consists of 1, 2, 3, 4 values. Then later on this memory object we are converting into a list. So that way the list will be pointing out. So this becomes list of 0, this becomes list of 1, this becomes list of 3, and this becomes list of. So this is another way of scanning multiple values using map function. So and if you really want to deliver the output to the user, Python program will have every Python program probably will have one or more outputs. So we use the print function to deliver the output to the user. So how do you print actually? So the print function normally prints any number of objects. Any number of objects can be represented as, you can write this as star gs. Any number of arguments. Star represents any number of arguments. But all the arguments before you print will be converted into strings. So I want to print see three values. One is see employee ID. Other one is employee salary. Say 100K, and I want to print the employee name. Name of the employee say Lakshman. So how do you want to print these values? So you want to print these values separated with space, or you want to print these values in each value in the new line. So if you want to format the output, the print function that will be printing on screen, you can use the rest of the parameters to represent or to format the output of the print on screen. So by default, print will be printing a new line. Once if you write a statement like print, then print hi, so it will print hi on screen, and then it will print a new line. Then cursor will come to the next line. So by default, the print will be printing a new line after printing each variable. So if you want to print other than new line, you can set this end could be say this end could be sometimes an exclamatory mark. So that will print exclamatory mark after printing say you can say after I. So by default, file is equal to file. This is the file object. You can see the file object is used to use notify the print where to print the output data. You can print the output data either in a file or on a standard output device, which is called monitor. You can see on screen the monitor is represented by in Python sys.stdout. By default, the output of the print will be printed on monitor. By default, it will print a new line after printing, and by default, it will separate the values using space. Space is the by default separator. So rest of the parameter, all these parameters are actually optional. You have also one more parameter, that is the last one. It is called flush. So flush is used to specify if the output is plus or buffered. What does it mean? You print say on using print statement. You say hi, welcome to Python. Welcome to Python. What happens? The statement will be printed on monitor. So, but before you print the statement on monitor, the statement will be in a buffer called as monitor buffer, output buffer, monitor buffer. So before you print this I welcome to Python, this will be stored in the monitor buffer in the memory area used for the monitor. Either it could be part of the RAM or it could be part of the hardware circuit also. Then the output it will print on screen. So after printing, whether you want to keep this output just now printed within the monitor buffer or you want to flush it out. So that can be set using the flush parameter. So by default, it is false means the output on screen will be buffered. It will be available. If you really want to delete the data in the output buffer, you can set this default value or plus value as true. So this is the way how one can use the print statement using multiple parameters to format the text on output screen or to customize the output that the program is actually delivering to the user.